Sam Manicom. How are you, man?
I'm really good, Bruce. Mate, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I'm blown away.
Oh, mate, don't be daft. It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on. So we are trying something new today. I'm using Zoom and I'm trying to record off of Zoom. Because otherwise I sent you a massive long list of what I needed from you, didn't I? And then you said, why don't you just use Zoom and record it?
Yeah, but also, I mean, you've got to be completely upfront of this, because I started off my response with, you are dealing with an IT idiot here. I don't have most of the stuff that you're talking about. I do actually have a GoPro, but I've got no way of setting up in a position where I can actually see whether I'm sitting in the shot or not.
Oh, what a nightmare. What a nightmare.
I mean, I've no idea whether the volume and things like that are any good or not, but you'll have to tell me.
GoPros have got a lot better with their sound, but I mean, ultimately they're an action camera, so sound isn't their main focal point. You can buy like auxiliary mics and stuff for them now, which improves matters a lot. But yeah, the sound's not great with GoPro, because it will constantly look for any sort of peaks in the audio, and it tries to compensate for everything automatically. So I've just done a podcast with Peter Hickman, the Isle of Man TT racer and BSB rider, right. And he just used a GoPro, and in parts of that podcast the audio's fine, it's great, but in other parts it's terrible, and it took me days to try and rescue the audio, but we got there eventually, I think, hopefully, with it. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much, because I've had TMF on here, Missenden Flyer, probably one of the biggest, one of the biggest moto vloggers in the UK, and he mucked up his audio, so I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, right, we'll start as we mean to go on, and I'll crack the beer open. You have a tipple there, so slange.
I'm going to enjoy you with one of these to begin with.
Oh, a brew with Bru.
Cheers.
Enjoy. Oh, fantastic. Well, mate, I'm sure you've seen this before, haven't you? You've seen some of the podcasts before. So you know the format. Basically, I chuck up on my social media to say who's the next guest, and then people submit their questions. And as you'd expect with one of the most prominent world adventure travellers out there, there's no shortage of questions for you. So how about we just crack on straight in? Is that all right?
Brilliant. Let's do it.
Excellent. Beautiful. Right, as always, I'll go to Patreon first. The only time I'll mention it. Thank you very much to all the clans folk over on Patreon, and we'll crack on with their questions. Anthony Whistler, he asks, it's a kind of generic one for anyone well-travelled on a bike. How do you start? I'd love to do some trips, but I can never sit down and plan. I always draw a blank. So maybe, how do you start?
I think the first thing is work out where you want to go. And that's actually harder than a person thinks, isn't it? Because we've got so many options as to where we can go. The next is work out how much money you can get together. The next is work out how much time you think that you can get together, because those three things fit so hand in hand with each other.
Absolutely.
Once you've worked out where you'd like to go, then go and buy yourself some maps. Get maps out and put them on the living room floor, and then just drool and dream all over them. Have a really good look at what the road possibilities are, and start having a look at the name places along the way, and start ticking off the places in every country that you're thinking about going to. Work yourself the top 10 things that you would like to see, because that can dramatically affect the route that you follow through a particular country.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, we're so lucky, aren't we? Because we can go online and we can even look and see how much petrol costs in the different countries around the world. And of course, that too helps you work out if you want to go into that sort of level of depth of investigation while you're planning. But I mean, that can work out for example, okay, petrol in this country costs $2 a litre. And in this country, the neighbouring country, it costs $1 a litre. Okay, well, that means that technically I should spend less time in the $2 a litre country and more time in the $1 because, hey, I can go a hell of a lot further. Yep. So it's little things like that. that can work out. But I think the other thing is to have a look at what sort of riding you actually want to do. Do you want to spend an awful lot of time off-road? Or are you quite happily just trundling along and meandering every bit of asphalt that you can find? Or do you want a general mix of everything? Because those, again, will work out, help you work out what route that you'd like to have. I think one of the key questions you have to ask yourself is, why am I doing this? What do I want to get out of doing a big trip? Because if you set off knowing what you want out of a trip, then the chances are you're going to achieve it. But I tell you what, I guarantee you that 6 months into your trip, you're probably already changing the things that you set out to do. You probably added to them or completely rubbished that idea and you headed off on a tangent. Because that's one of the beauties of travel, isn't it? Keeping an open mind and taking advantage of the opportunities.
Definitely. I think, sorry, for me, I had set quite a tight deadline, really, for where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And even at the time, I didn't appreciate how much I was missing on that, because I was focused on the journey. You know, I need to be there to do that to do that. I gave myself some leeway, but definitely not enough. And I'm very envious of people like you who really embraced that and 8 years you were on the road for, weren't you? Phenomenal.
Yeah, but I just turned into a two-wheel bum, didn't I?
Yeah, actually, I just suddenly thought that when I said that. There may well be some people tuning in here who perhaps, for whatever reason, don't know you or have never heard of you. So can I hand it over to you to just give a little bit of synopsis as to who you are and what you've done?
Okay. Jeepers, whenever I'm put on the spot, I always start off with an It's terrible. You can edit it all out, Bruce. I was born and brought up until I was 10 years old in the Congo, or Zaire as it subsequently became. My parents were living and working out there. And when I was 10 years old, came back to the UK, which is where my family originally were from. And I don't know, just growing up in a place like that and being able to run around wild barefoot and shorts and a t-shirt sometimes, just taught me not to be afraid of very much and taught me to stretch boundaries. I mean, half the time my parents never clue what I was up to. And if they had, they would have been scared witless. Age 16, I set off and did my first solo trip. I did that on a bicycle. I'd been doing a paper round and all sorts of odd jobs and things like that, and saving money. And eventually I had enough money to buy myself a brand new bicycle. And I'd kind of stood there looking at it and thinking, wow, this is just amazing. I mean, it's 3-speed. Wow, I never had 1-speed clunkers made out of bits and pieces out of canals and that sort of stuff before then. But I was looking at it and thinking, right, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to ride it to school? And it was looking back at me and saying, no, come on, we've got to do more than that. So that's summer holidays. I borrowed a page out of my school atlas and we set off to ride through Europe. Age 16, that was such a fantastic trip to make because it taught me an awful lot of things. One, if you don't try, then you never find out. And two, making it to a destination doesn't matter because it's what you see along the way that really does matter. Yep. So that was a pivotal point in life for me, and what a lucky guy to have that age 16. After that, I got settled into a career as you're supposed to do, but I had such rotten, itchy feet because I'd already discovered that this traveling lark was a buzz. So I set off and spent 3 years hitchhiking and backpacking and just generally buzzing around Europe, and then made it across to Australia and through India and various other places. And when I got back from that, my mother was looking at me and saying, hey, come on, you can't do this for the rest of your life. And I was thinking, yeah, well, why not? Yeah. You've still got to kind of earn money. And I came back from that trip with a huge debt. I'd maxed my credit cards out in the end and lived with that for the next year, living like a complete pauper so that I could pay these off as fast as I possibly could. And I hated the sensation, and I don't hate much, but that I've never forgot the sensation of really intensely disliking where I was at. And then got involved in a career again, did some more shorter trips, a year here and a year there, and then got into the career path again. And over the years I've backpacked, hitchhiked, bus sailed, been car trips and so on. And I'd sort of got on the career path, and I was at a stage where I was thinking, well, come on, you've got to do something different, because you can, and you know how brilliant it is out there. And so, yeah, I set off to spend a year riding the length of Africa, and got home 8 years later. I'd only been riding a motorcycle for I passed my test in 6 weeks, and 6 weeks later, I was at the edge of the Sahara looking south thinking, Sam, you are such an idiot. What are you doing? But, well, I was just busy.
Let's rewind a little bit there, Sam. In case you didn't catch that, folks, Sam passed his bike test, and 6 weeks later was now on the edge of the Sahara. Now, all those people that contact me and go, oh, I've only been riding 3 or 4 years, I don't think I've got enough skill level. Sam Manicom.
Yeah, bit of an idiot.
Not at all. So, we'll get into the actual... I could just sit here and listen to you talk for hours and hours, and we've done quite a few different overland events and stuff together, so I have sat and listened to you talk for hours and hours, but I'm sure we'll cover all the details of the trip throughout this chat. But that'll give you a little inkling as to what Sam's been involved with.
I'm a very, very lucky guy that I've been able to do as much as I have, and I have huge value for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for myself, I'm very aware of how I can't take this for granted that I've had that opportunity to go. But I'm also of the same mentality that you make those opportunities, as in the traveller, you the person, you have to make those opportunities come about, and you've got to work out your own plan that will facilitate however it is you're going to do your adventure. Everyone has their own restrictions, don't they? Family, money, health, all these different things. But there will be a way for you to live that dream somehow. It might not be for 8 years. You might have to break it down, but there will be a way to do it.
And to me, that's one of the complete joys of travel, and the reason why nobody's trip is ever the same as the last person's or the last 100 people, because your circumstances are yours. Yeah. Nobody else has got your circumstances. Nobody else is going to travel at the time you are, the way you are, with the finances you have or haven't got, or what your background is and the things that it's taught you and so on. You may be traveling through the same country as 100 people have before, but you'll see it in a completely different way. And I think that's a fantastic value.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because it's your experience, isn't it? It's everything is how you interpret the situation. How does the person that you meet when you're away, how do they react to you at that moment in time? You could be the nicest paced person in the world, but if you're dehydrated, in pain, ill, hungry, you can be short tempered. I know I get very hangry, which I didn't appreciate before, and that it's the old what's the box they call it? Your reaction affects my reaction, which affects your reaction. It's that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so we have next question. Sorry, David Hemmings. Sam, what motivated you to do the trip, and would there be anything different that you would do if you did it again?
I was motivated to do the trip because I suddenly realised that I wasn't enjoying the career path that I was following. I was doing very well at it, and initially I'd had a lot of fun with it, but it had got to the stage where I was feeling a little bit jaded with it, and I didn't like that sensation. And over a significant number of beers, I started to realise actually I had no responsibility. I didn't have any debts. My family were well. I had no kids. I had no pets. There was going to be no better time to head off and travel again. And while I was sitting drinking those beers, I started to ponder, well, how would you like to do it? You've sailed, you've backpacked, and all the other different ways that you've traveled. What about something new? What about something different? And then the next set of the thought process is, well, what didn't you like about those other ways of traveling? And it's like being on a bus or a train, isn't it? And we've all had this experience where we've been looking out of the window and we've seen something fantastic and we're gone. We can't stop, we can't get off, we can't go and look at this thing. And sometimes we're lucky enough to be able to go back at a later date, but normally we can't, we've just gone.
Yeah.
And going through all of the likes and dislikes, I kept on coming back to riding a motorcycle because it was going to tick all of the positive boxes. The only thing was I'd been banned from riding a motorcycle when I was a youngster, and quite right too, because my parents knew me so well. They knew that I would be that guy that was trying to go around that corner too fast. So the hardest thing about going off on this trip was actually telling my mother, Mum, I'm going to ride a motorcycle the length of Africa. And, you know, she was brilliant. She just looked at me and she said, well, I knew something was bubbling away in there. Yeah. And then the quality of my mother, she said, what can I do to help? I mean, what more could you wish for something like that?
Mums have that habit, don't they? You know, yeah, they can either make or break, can't they?
If we're lucky, they're tuned into us and we're tuned into them, and that's it's a really fortunate thing in life if we've got it. David asked, and hello David, by the way. You asked, what would I have done differently? And I think there are two things. One is I would have learned much more about riding off-road. I dealt with an awful lot of that along the way, and I fell off a lot. I damaged myself by not knowing what I was doing. I didn't even know the correct way to pick up a motorcycle. And these were all things that I learned. You can learn everything when you're traveling if you're positive thinking and you use common sense and allow yourself the time. I mean, there were days when I dropped my motorcycle and I looked at it and I just thought, how on earth am I going to pick this up? You know, that horrible moment when it's fallen over, but it's fallen over facing downhill. Oh.
Yep.
And you're on gravel.
Yeah.
And you just think, there's no way that I'm going to get this up on my own. Yeah. Well, you find the way to do it. And quite often it's not the right way, but you still managed to do it. Absolutely. So I would have learned an awful lot more about riding off-road. I think by doing that, not only can you keep yourself a lot safer, but you can give yourself a lot more fun, because you'll see more of those side turnings and think, okay, let's go look. And that to me is one of the joys about traveling with a motorcycle. It's not sticking to a route. It's taking advantage of the fact that you've got the freedom to see that side turning and go for it. So I would have done that. And the other thing is I would have been a lot more restrictive with the amount of stuff that I took. We all take too much. As a novice motorcyclist, I'd planned for every eventuality that I could possibly think of, and the load was stupid. But hey, that's part of the learning curve. None of us get it right to begin with.
Everyone does it, don't they? Everyone does it to begin with. There's that old adage where they say, pack, then unpack, half it, pack, unpack, half it, and basically keep going till you think, I can't possibly survive on that. And then you're probably going to have to half that and then go.
It's one of the rules that I always try and use is the two uses rule. In other words, if something's got two uses, then there's a good chance you should be taking it with you. And the ground sheet's a perfect example of that. I've talked about this so many times before, but it's always incredibly relevant.
It is.
Get yourself a non-crinkly ground sheet, because, well, not only is your ground sheet going to protect the underside of your tent and stop, sharp stones and things like that piercing your bathtub inside your tent. If you sleep in a tent and you know text, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. If not, then you think, who is this guy? But the other thing is about having a non-crinkly ground sheet is if you end up sleeping in a really rough, grotty hotel and you can see that the sheets have been washed for the last 15 people that have stayed in it, well, put your ground sheet on top of the bed and you've got something that's relatively clean in comparison. And non-crinkly is great because, of course, when you turn over in the middle of the night, you're not going to wake yourself up all the time.
Now there speaks the voice of experience. Brilliant. What have we got here? Haggis, one for both of us. From our world travels, what are your top 3 must-visit countries and why?
Oh, you first on that, Bruce.
Ooh, top 3. Norway always comes into this, my answer, when I get asked. Just for me, it's possibly one of the most breathtakingly beautiful countries I've ever been to. I've said it loads of times before. It's like Scotland on steroids. It's like proper Lord of the Rings. It looks like it's been painted. The roads are a lot of fun, but then the police are very hot on speeding up there. And the people, the biking community and the people there, it was one of the first places where it really struck me how awesome people are. You know, I was just all of a sudden I was just being faced by complete random strangers who were being really friendly and helpful. And I just, up to then, I hadn't had any issues really coming through Europe. And I just happened to need a set of tyres right up, sort of halfway up Norway. So I found myself in a position having to ask for help, which I'd never really been in before that, going through Europe. And so that was really the start of the whole overland adventure for me, where you open yourself up to complete random strangers and you get it back in droves from people, don't you? So Norway's always had a little special place in my heart, definitely, for all those reasons. Japan, again, for similar reasons, stunningly beautiful. I'm blown away by the history of the place. And again, I just found the people really, really nice there. Well, even more so than a lot of other places I'd been to. I just found them, again, I suppose I crashed in Japan, so I found myself really needing help and being very vulnerable, and so I was taken in by a completely random family for 3 weeks, and again, that's got a little special place. And then I think another one would be Russia, just because it was this polar opposite of how I expected. You know, I expected Russians to be very cold, not helpful in the slightest, possibly quite a dangerous place. And for me, it was the polar opposite. I found the Russians really warm and helpful, very welcoming, very sociable. The vodka comes in handy there. And it was just, you know, it's a massive place, isn't it? You know, Russia's 10,000 kilometers across. There's 7 time zones. It's just that once you've crossed that place, I think it's a massive tick, isn't it? And yeah, those 3 stand out for me, definitely.
Well, I absolutely understand why, although I've not been to 2 of them. Norway, oh yeah, absolutely incredible. Japan, no, I've never been there. I was very tempted to when I was in Australia. But when I worked out the cost of getting to Japan, my budget, it just wasn't going to work. And at the time, I put together an application for heading into China. And you had to put almost a business proposal together to do it.
Yep.
And I had a lot of fun. I had no expectation of getting a thumbs up for going to China. But I thought, well, hey, if you don't try, you won't find out. And it was quite entertaining exercise to get into. To my amazement, just before Australia, I got the thumbs up for it. The only thing was that they wanted $100 a day from me, and there was no way I had that sort of money. And this is back in, what will that have been, 1994. So it would have been an entertaining time to be there.
Yeah, but, definitely.
Anyway, Russia, I haven't been. It's always on the to-ride list, and the more I hear from people saying exactly the same thing that you have just said, that it is really a country that is got the wrong image for how it really is, makes me want to go there even more. So one of these days, yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely. In no order of importance, Namibia. I fell in love with this country because of the amazing riding there and the wildlife and its history. The mix of asphalt and gravel there, absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, they've even got roads like made out of salt that you can ride on. They're packed salt along the coastline. And it's quite a weird sensation too. When you look down some sections of it, it looks like you're riding on black ice. Well, of course, you've got a hell of a lot more grip than you do on black ice. And I know that. Because, of course, it's salt. But the gravel roads in Namibia are just drop dead gorgeous. And going to a country where you've got the only elephants in the world that are adapted to live in pure desert. Now, that's quite an achievement for such a huge animal. So this country's full of awe, as far as I'm concerned. Next country, Colombia. Colombia was one of those countries that had a real air of danger about it when we were heading there. That's my partner Birgit and I. When we were heading there, it was only just beginning to ease up, and the political drug lord banditry situation was beginning to lighten up. And I'm not masochistic, but I like to go into countries that have a bit of tension. There's something very, very real about them. It's almost as if the shine has been stripped away and you see what really exists in a country. And heading towards Colombia, Birgit was quite uncomfortable about it and quite nervous. But as we were getting there, we were meeting one or two backpackers that were coming out and a couple of motorcyclists. And we talked to them about it. And they said, well, look, it's like everywhere in the world, there are places that you don't want to go. But the greater percentage of the country is fantastic. Don't miss it. And that, of course, exactly what I wanted to hear. And I watched the expression on Birgit's face change a little bit. So in we went. And the next day, we were in the middle of a major riot going on with tear gas and all of the rest. So, welcome to Colombia.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago, and there were good reasons for it. And that was the only place that, well, not the only place, one other experience, but most of Colombia. We were there a couple of months and loved it. It's beautiful, fantastic road and hospitality, just superb. The other country, and I'm going to cheat here because I want to make it two, and this may surprise some of you guys, Canada and the United States. North America was the part of the world, and I'm including Mexico just tangentially. North America was the part of the world that surprised me the most. I went into North America with a lot of preconceived ideas about what I was going to find there. And normally I try really hard not to travel with preconceived ideas because they're so dangerous. But in our own countries, we're taught to think about different countries in different ways before, it's what we see on the news. It's what we're taught in school. And so on. It's what we read in papers.
Yep.
But so often when you get to a country, and this slots in so well, doesn't it, with what you just said about Russia, when you get to a country, it really surprises you. The reality is completely different to what you expected to find there. And both Canada and the United States had that effect on me and blew me away. And I haven't been back to Canada since the big trip. Definitely on my to ride again list. Fantastic. So much there that I hadn't seen. But the United States, I keep going back because I love exploring there. And I love the fact that I'm still finding surprises.
Absolutely, yeah. I totally agree with you there. The States was just like the last stage. It was almost like it was the stepping stone to get me from the other side of the world back to Ireland and then home. It was the last part of the trip, and I didn't really even plan for it to be, a significant part of the trip. It's just, I've been to America, we'll get through it. Nah, you haven't, have you? Have you been to like Florida or New York? You've not been to America, and it's definitely somewhere where my wife and I, more or less every year, we've gone back and for like 2 weeks just hired a big truck, flown into like either Boston or JFK, New York, somewhere like that. Hire a big truck and then just hit the road. No plan whatsoever. We've not booked anything. We've just gone on road trips, and you see so much. It really has opened my eyes to how much I actually missed on my trip just by hitting the road with no plan and just getting off the main roads and going to the back roads, and I loved it.
That's great, isn't it? I mean, plans are great things to have, but they end up, you run the risk of them being railway tracks, and you end up sticking on those plans and not taking advantage of opportunities, and we all do it. But it is one of the challenges that we have to work against when we're traveling, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Getting ourselves mentally on those railway lines or tram lines.
Yeah.
And one of the things with the United States, for me heading there, is I was thinking that it was going to be too easy. After 6.5 years in developing world countries most of the time, I thought, well, okay, I can find food, I can find somewhere to stay, I can get a shower, and it's just roads are going to be too easy, etc. But actually, within the first couple of weeks, I realised that actually most of those things weren't true at all. It was as easy as you wanted it to be, but you could make it as complicated as you wanted it to be. The joy of having a decent asphalt road that could take you to that place that you wanted to see without 2 weeks of grief on really gnarly, horrible dirt roads which of course you could do if you wanted to, but just being able to see more things because you had the choice. And that was the key, wasn't it, in the States? You can go on the freeways, you can go on the main roads that existed before the freeways, and you can go on the little back roads, or you can go on the dirt and the gravel. The choice is one of the things that makes it so phenomenal, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. The as you said, the infrastructure is so huge there that you have that massive choice, don't you? You can do the whole back road trail right across the States if you want to, or you can jump on the freeway and cover a state in a day. It's, it's up to you. Yeah, awesome. How did you find? I'm not sure if someone might cover it, but it came up in what you were saying there. I found it probably took me about 6 to 8 weeks from the start of my trip before I was actually in it and realised sort of what I was doing, because I would say probably easy for the first 6 weeks I was just on another bike trip. I'm on like a long holiday. I'll be going home soon, and then it's almost like a switch goes off where you're like, no, I'm just heading east. It's the only way I'm getting home is when I've completed this. This is life now, and
absolutely fantastic, isn't it?
It's awesome. Yeah, it's like, wow, this is life. I am living the dream. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that 6 to 8 weeks. It's exactly the same for me. It's that period, and I spent that first 6 weeks going too fast, covering too many miles, not stopping enough, just because all of a sudden I'm free, and I'm on holiday, and I'm on my motorcycle, and there's a road, and there's new stuff to be discovering, and I'm just enjoying the buzz of the ride. But after that 6 weeks, when suddenly I realised, but no, this is it. Then I'm stopping every 50 miles and I'm standing and I'm looking at the view. And it doesn't matter whether the view is drop dead gorgeous mountains or whether they're gnarliest, dirtiest, semi-derelict factory there possibly is. That's what's at the 50-mile stage. So that's why I've stopped and I've taken the time to stand and to look and to smell and to hear and to feel quite often, all of those sorts of things. And it's that pivotal point, isn't it, when all of a sudden you realise, hey, slow down.
Yeah,
this is what you're out here for.
Yeah, I take from you that you're naturally that sort of person who likes to take in their surroundings anyway. In the sense that I find with me, and I'm still guilty of this now, despite like all the lessons you learn on the road, I still do it. If I'm away on the bike, say I'm heading up to, I don't know, let's just say Fort William. I'm doing a ride up there. It's almost like I set this thing in my head, I've got to get there. And I have this overwhelming impulse to get there. And once I get there, I'm like, oh, I've missed out so much of that journey. Why didn't I take time? But it's a real battle in me to sort of slow down and appreciate what's round about. I think I'm getting a little bit better, but I'm still nowhere near perfect at it.
But I think, as soon as you start living in the real world, in inverted commas again, and I'm not sure if that's the right way of putting it, but you get what I mean, then you start having to slip back into the routines and the rush and the meeting deadlines and all of those sorts of things. And when you're on the road, well, your deadlines are, what's the weather doing? How long's the visa for? Those sorts of things. So you've got more time technically to stop and be curious about things. And for me, that's one of the most important things about travel is being curious. What's out there? What can I discover? What can I learn about? What can I see? And sometimes it's just the way something smells that makes me think, wow, I never knew that existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I one of the most ridiculous things I remember my mentality being on the road was a thing that comes to my mind was Chichen Itza, in is that Peru, isn't it? Chichen Itza's in Peru. And I was about a day's ride from there. I was heading there, and then I also needed a set of tyres. I thought, in about 700-800 miles, I'll need a set of tyres. And the only place that I could find to get tyres for the GSXR was in Lima, in the capital. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I could just go to Lima, and this is what makes me sick thinking about it. I can always fly back, and I can go to Chichen Itza with the wife, And I look back now and I think, you bloody idiot! I had the opportunity to ride to Chichen Itza, and instead I didn't. I went straight to the capital city, stayed in a hostel, and got a set of tires. And you just think, what an idiot! That mentality of I can always come back and do this. You can, but
it's dangerous, isn't it? It's like seeing something and you think, "Oh, that would make a great photo." No, an old guy on a donkey-drawn horse and cart type of thing, and you think, "Oh, I'm in a country where there'll be hundreds of those," but you're never going to see that one that made you think, "Well, that would make a really nice photo."
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to stop and do it. Yeah,
I met a guy. I think I was in Romania, and I rode by this chap, and he looked like the guy out of Monty Python, Life of Brian. You know, the guy that took the vow of silence and sat in the ditch with the mulberry. Jehovah, Jehovah. He was a spitting image of that guy. He was, a white guy, but very sunburnt, long sort of linen gown on. I think he was even bare feet and long white hair. Like your typical sort of god image. And he was pulling a metal fabricated trailer with a big plaque on it that said "Walking for Peace." And the guy had been on the road, I think it was 15 years or 16 years that was on that. I didn't take a picture. And you think, why would you not do that? I think I even remember thinking at the time, I'll see him again. If he's walking, I'll meet him. Of course you would. Of course you would. Yeah,
isn't it amazing that there are people out like that out in the world doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And the number of people that will have seen him and stopped and thought about it just for a moment that they wouldn't have given such a great topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And the amount of people that are out doing stuff like that and not shouting about it, that there's no fuss about it whatsoever. The amount of travellers I met I remember meeting this young lad, 21, 22-year-old, I think he was Swiss or something, but he was in Chile, met him in a hostel in Chile, and he was cycling from Ushuaia. In fact, he'd been in Deadhorse, he was heading to Ushuaia, so he was cycling the length of the American continent. And, he didn't even have a website, he wasn't on social media, he was actually doing it to meet girls, because he'd built a little...
Good man.
Yeah, he built, in his little trailer that he was towing, he had a kite board on there, like one of those buggies that's pulled along the beach by the kites. He had that with him, and he had a little seat. And I said, is your girlfriend with you? And he went, he said, not this current one, but you never know who I'll meet. And that's basically all it was. What a lad. Yeah, definitely. So just take your time, folks. I think that's probably the biggest message from all that is take your time and grasp the opportunities as and when they arise, because before you know it, you'll have moved on and you won't get that opportunity again. Right, I've just seen who does the next question. Pete English. Now, Pete's got a bit of a reputation for some pretty deep questions, but I think this one's actually quite down the line. Let's have a read. When you left your passport and traveller checks in, I think he means Lesotho, by accident, did he honestly think they would still be there when he returned to collect them? And how relieved were you to find that the four ladies still had them?
Pete, that's such a good question. And it is Lushoto, which is some mountains in northern Tanzania. And the build up to this story was that I'd been traveling through Kenya and did a safari trip. We rented a 4x4, a whole bunch of other travelers, and myself, two Aussie girls, two Israeli guys, an American guy called John, and myself. And off we went and we did our own safari, which was fantastic because this 4x4 took us everywhere. But I got on particularly well with John. He's, 6'4", dreadlocks, and a mad sense of humour. And I said to him, look, what are you doing next? And he said, well, I've got a month left on my flight ticket, so I'm not quite sure. And I said, well, look, I'm heading down through Tanzania. Would you like to come with me, ride pillion on the back of the bike? Yeah, okay. Of course, he'd heard my stories and he knew that by this time, oh gosh, how long had I been riding a bike? 6 months maybe. Almost never had a pillion passenger on the back of the bike.
What could go wrong?
A lot of rubbish by then. Given away an awful lot of stuff. This is really embarrassing, but I had an awful lot of pairs of socks when I started. Set fetters or something. But he said, yeah, okay, let's, I'm fantastic. So we kitted him out with a crash helmet, and it was one of these open face things. It was bright yellow, and it made him look like some sort of demented bumblebee with his dreadlocks sticking out of the side of his head. An army surplus canvas jacket, which we put leather patches into the elbows. And he had we got him some gloves, and he had his hiking boots and things like this. So, he was reasonably well kitted out, and off we went. And of course, he's much bigger than I am. So sitting on the back of the bike, our shadow on the road must have looked really funny. But we made it down through into Tanzania, and we were skirting along the bottom of the mountains, and we kept on looking up to them and thinking, wow, they look awesome up there. And a turning came, so we thought, right, let's go and have a look. So we wound our way up this steep road to the top, to a little town up there, booked ourselves into a little local hotel, which was run by 5 ladies. We spent the next few days walking around and exploring. One of the little local boys took us by the hand and guided us all over the place. The things that we discovered because of him, fantastic. But then the time came, and piled everything on the bikes, and off we went, and back down the hill and onto the dirt road. And by this time it had been hissing down with rain, and that dirt road was just appalling. I'd never ridden on anything like this with a pillion passenger, let alone a 4 pillion passenger. And it was warm and raining inside my helmet, and the raindrops were so heavy I felt them hit me. It was an incredibly unpleasant experience, and you can imagine the joy when we finally made it to the asphalt. And there was a hotel, a bit out of our price range, but we thought, stuffed it. We've earned this. Went to book in, and that was when I realised that I'd left my traveller's checks and my passport underneath my pillow in this hotel room.
Oh.
All that distance back.
Oh, no.
It was one of those moments where you can't believe how bloody stupid you've been. You know better than this.
Yeah.
So, I was knackered by this time. That was really hard work with a big guy on the back of the bike on the road in that condition. And I thought, I'm not strong enough to ride back again. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to hitchhike. And I'm one of the unluckiest guys in the world because things go wrong all of the time, but I'm lucky and I've got a fantastic guardian angel. And something, when it goes wrong, always turns absolutely brilliant. And I promise you, I'd only been standing there for 5 or 10 minutes when a car stopped in front of me. It was a 4x4. You want a lift? Yeah, please. Where are you going? Oh, well, I'm going up to this town. Oh, so am I. Could I come along with you? Oh, yeah, of course. And we're sort of getting along quite nicely and bouncing along, and I'm enjoying the view this time, and the ruts just aren't a problem because I'm able to see sideways all the stuff that I'd missed.
Yeah.
But all the time we're traveling, I've got this pit in the bottom of my stomach, which has got that squeamish, sick feeling that you get when you know that you've been a complete arse. Mm-hmm. And you may be about to pay a really nasty price for being such an idiot. But, there was this other little voice in the back of my mind that kept on saying, yeah, but people are mostly good. The chances of you getting there and it being okay are actually far greater than there being a real cluster when you get there. And I was dropped off just near the hotel, and there were the 5 ladies, and big grins on their faces and holding out my money belt and And one of them just went, that says enough. That's absolutely enough. I'll tell you what, I never, ever left my money and my passport underneath my pillow again.
Lesson learned.
That's a really, really good question. It taught me, or underlined to me yet again, trust people first. The chances are they are trustworthy. We spend too much time in life being suspicious of other people and expecting them to prove to us that they can be trusted, where in actual fact, it's the other way around.
Absolutely.
Wait for them to prove that they can't be trusted before you go that way. It works.
Absolutely. And I think something that you learn, don't you, particularly when you overland travel, because it's not like you're going from an airport to a tourist destination. You're not being sanitized to that extent. You're out mixing with normal, proper people within their own confines. You learn how much bull is out there in the media about places, about people, about cultures, religion, everything like that. People are people, aren't they? The world over, people are people. It's the same. Might speak something different, speak a different language. They might think different priorities in certain things, believe in different things, but people are people, aren't they? And people are nice.
It's just so true.
Yeah. I was a real skeptic of that before traveling, and that really did open my eyes. And I found it very hard to fit back into my old job life in particular, for no other reason than I think to exist in the old bill, you have to be quite very skeptical. You've got to be on guard, because the vast majority, in the cities anyway, the vast majority of the times, you don't often deal with people who are wanting your help. You know, occasionally you are that sort of knight in shining armor, yeah, and that's great. But the vast majority of the times within a city, you're reacting to something. So you're looking for that person that's done wrong. So people are always on guard. People are always very suspicious of you. And I found it very hard to come back and adopt that sort of mentality again. Yeah.
Sure, I totally understand that, and I understand why it was so hard for you when you went out, because you'd been educated to, repetitively to think a particular way, and you'd had to live that way. Otherwise, you would never have survived. I mean, we on the street, we just don't see half of what you guys have to deal with. And
no.
Respect.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, but I have a lot of respect for the old bill, but then I also think we're very, I'm saying we, like I'm still part of it, we are very guilty of being quite generic, as I just said, in that we are very suspicious of people, and I know why we are, but I'm so glad I'm not in that environment anymore, where it's almost like you have to be that. You know, I can let go of that now and realise everyone's decent, everyone's good.
Do you remember that old television programme, Dixon of Dock Green?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, that's always, to me, I mean, I was brought up on this as a kid when we were back in the UK. That was one of the things that was on television. And I always remember thinking, I mean, what a wonderful way to do policing, when you're there with your key aim to be to guide people in the right direction and to help people when they're in trouble, to rap them on the knuckles when they've got it wrong. And I see signs of brilliant policing like that still happening. I was coming back from the London Motorcycle Show one time, and I was on Libby, my R80 GS, and I still had the books that I hadn't sold left. I had 4 pop-up banners. I had clothes for 5 days, etc., etc. And I was overloaded. And I was coming back down the 303. It was about 11:30 at night. There was hardly a soul out there. And so I had the throttle open a little bit more than I should have done. And I was just having a buzz. You know, this is a great way to wind down from the show. 5 days of being full on. That's including setup and so on. And then I saw flashing blue lights in my mirror, and I thought, "Oh, you idiots!" And this it was a police motorcyclist, and he pulled up next door to me, and he just sat there next door to me with his light still going, looked across, waggled his finger at me, shook his head, and then opened his throttle and. And to me, that was perfect policing, because I've never ridden that overloaded again, and certainly not that fast when I've been that overloaded. And I've always had a bit more of a look in my rearview mirror for a flashing blue light.
Definitely. But then, you know, your observation's obviously a lot better, because you're looking for the old bill all the time. Your observation of the road ahead and your environment, that's gone up, isn't it? So double tick.
Perfect policing. He didn't need to do anything else to teach a lesson. Anyway, I sidetracked this, didn't I? I'm famous for it.
I think, next question here, I was just having a look there, trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to see what the next question was going to be in case we'd covered it. Andy Bowen, I think we've kind of covered it, but maybe you've got some other story. What's the funniest story Sam has from his travels?
There are lots. But this one I normally tell in presentations because it is a perfect sign of the sorts of things that we've been talking about in the past. And it's a perfect example of you can never take people or situations for granted. I had an accident in Tanzania, and cutting a very long story short, it was an incredibly gut-wrenching, scary story. At the end of it, I was given an invitation to go to visit a village in the desert in the center of Tanzania, and I decided that actually that was what I was doing. That was what I was going to do. And I headed out to this village, not a word in common with anybody in the village. They were so far off the beaten track that they didn't speak Swahili, and I'd learned a little bit of that. Of course, no English or anything else. But using sign language, I persuaded the chief.
I can see where this is going.
You can bleep out the gnarly bit. I persuaded the chief of the village that, I would be allowed to stay with him. And when I mentioned the young lad who'd given me the invitation, his name was Domu. He was such a smart kid, youngster, about 11 years old, out doing his version of what I was doing. So he literally had a stick with a little knotted handkerchief on the end of it, and he was out exploring. But anyway, so when I mentioned his name, I was made welcome, and I spent the next days sitting with the chief and his men, and they were telling me fantastic stories about life in the village and the history of the village. And this has all been done with sign language and with drawings in the soil and so on. The chief also wanted to try my tent, and I had a little one-man tent. And this thing I called the space capsule because it was so tiny. The only way we could get in it was feet first. It was a ridiculous choice for a travel tent. And he tried my tent, and he came out shaking his head and looking at me as if to say, "What sort of weirdo are you?" And he was right. It was ridiculous. Anyway, so after a few days, I'd been watching what was happening in other places in the village. And every day, in the middle of the day, in the midday heat, the women would collect together in the shade of the big tree that was there. And they would be mending clothes, preparing food, feeding babies, all sorts of things like that. But they were also making jewelry out of seeds and stones and bits of bone and that sort of thing. And what they would do with this is that they would walk it out to the main road, and then they'd sell those things so that they could buy the things that they couldn't make or grow for themselves. Mm-hmm. Such things as salt and soap and so on. Anyway, the women were just in fits of laughter every day, whereas we men were very stern and serious with what was going on. After day 4 or something like that, I said to the chief, using sign language again, can I go and sit with the women tomorrow? And I tell you what, he double took. Did I just say that right? You want to sit with the women? So consultation with the rest of the men, and they're all sort of looking at me and looking back at the chief, and you can hear the conversation going on. Well, he is a strange white man, and if he wants to sit with the women, then okay. Well, so the chief called over his first wife, and he did have quite a lot of wives. And he said to her,
"Brave man."
Yeah, absolutely. Right. He said to his first wife, "The white guy is going to come and sit with you tomorrow." And she shocks everybody by saying, "No way, he's not going to sit with us." But, well, of course, when you never say no to the chief in public, do you? In the hut, she was probably boss without a doubt, but in public, no way. Yeah. So I started to feel really uncomfortable about this. But then the next day came around, and out to the big tree, and silence, not a word, not a giggle, not a smile, and I felt awful. I put my sarong on the ground next door to the women because, well, I'd done it now, so I might as well just see what happened. And I then heard something really strange. I heard the chief's wife saying something in Swahili to one of the other women. I thought, wow, so they do speak some Swahili. So some of the women who were going out to the main road had learned Swahili so that they could sell the jewelry.
Wow.
So then I talked to her in a bit of Swahili, and it turned out that she'd also been to a mission school, and so she knew, and between the two of us, we cobbled together some language and we could start talking. It wasn't just sign language. Well, the next stage was the girls. They wanted to start asking questions because,
Yeah.
they were curious about this strange white guy that was suddenly amidst them. The first question that they asked was, the girls, they want to know, are you married? Well, of course, I said no, and that was translated back, and this was greeted with lots of giggles and rolling eyeballs in my direction. The next question made me laugh because it was, now bearing in mind that I just said that I wasn't married, the next question was, so how many children do you have? Difference in culture.
Yeah.
I said, well, no, I don't have any. And this was interpreted back, and this time looks of shock and consternation on the girls' faces.
Yeah.
And, they started asking her to ask me the next question. She was just saying, no way, I'm not asking him that. No. So they encouraged her, and eventually she got up. And I'm still sitting cross-legged on the floor thinking, what's coming next? This is bizarre. What a situation. Anyway, she walked over to me and she leant down and she poked me in the testicles and said, the girls, they want to know, something wrong?
Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are other bits that go with that story, but that you would have to bleep that out. So.
Yeah, that'll be for the after 9 p.m. version. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Travel. If you just let yourself get involved in a situation and you keep an open mind, you just never know what's going to happen next. And some of the funniest things happen when you never know what's going to happen next.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's the different cultures as well. Some cultures think nothing of that, whereas in the UK that's like a. Oh, you don't do that. You don't bring topics like that up in a conversation with a stranger. Whereas in others, they're very open about stuff, aren't they?
And I have to admit that I have never had my testicles poked by.
I mean, you're going back. Yeah. Right, next one.
That was Andy. That was a really nice question. Thank you for allowing me to tell that story.
It was a good one, wasn't it? I like this when you open it up to other people to post questions, because some of the questions you get are awesome. Yeah. In fact, speaking of which, this is a good one. Lee Hurst, for both of us, if you could only ride a bike for 2 more weeks and then never again, what week of motorcycling would you repeat and why? And what week of motorcycling would you like to do that you never have and why? Wow. Wow.
Lee,
after you.
Lee, you're tight. Only 2 weeks and a week for each one. Go on. My favourite road in the world is the Carretera Austral in southern Chile. This is mostly a dirt road, and it's like riding through a prehistoric environment. The vegetation there, it's just dramatically different. Trees are huge. If you're there after the rains or when the snow melts, then the waterfalls just come shooting at 90 degrees out of the rock faces. The gravel changes from being fist-sized to walnut to pea. It's just a constant challenge every day, riding through an incredibly dramatic landscape. And I loved it. My ride was actually cut short there because I ended up damaging myself pretty badly. And so I didn't ride everything that I would like to ride. So I would love to go back and spend a week riding that. But I tell you what, Lee, I'd rather have 2 weeks if I could. A ride that I would like to do in a week that I haven't done yet, somewhere close to home actually, I would like to ride the coast road of West Island. But Can I have sunshine every day, please? Can you what? Have sunshine every day.
I think that's just a little bit too far out the realms of reality there.
It's a road that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I just haven't got around to it yet. But the more I see about it, the more I read about it, then I just think, fantastic. It'll be great.
Yeah, everyone keeps telling me I need to go out and do it's the Wild Atlantic Way, isn't it? It's what they call it, the route up the west. And I wanted to do it this year, but obviously I don't think that'll happen. So it's another one getting put to next year. I'll do it next year, but I plan on doing it next year. For me, Lee, a week that I've done that I'd like to repeat and why. I would say probably go back to the world trip in Laos, my time in Laos, where it's the sort of iconic bit in my trip where you might have seen the footage of when as you said, when you drop your bike and it's facing downhill the wrong way, downhill on gravel. Well, I had that. I was on part of the old Ho Chi Minh Trail on a Jigsaw Thou, and they hadn't built the road yet. They'd literally just sort of skimmed the dirt off, so it was just rock underneath. And I ended up going down this hill that was like that. It was hard to walk down on a foot. So on the bike, stamping on the back wheel with the back wheel just locked up, I was just gaining speed and momentum, careering down this hill. And then there was just an open pit to my left that went down to where the river was. You know, it's like 100-odd foot drop off the edge. And obviously you go where you look, and I could just see I kept heading that way, and it was like, oh. So I ended up having to jump off the bike and crash the bike. And as you said, it took me hours. I think it was about an hour and a half to pick that bike up, and eventually I managed to pick it up. But that section of the trip really sticks in my mind because it was probably physically the hardest, but also the most rewarding, I think, because that when I got through it and got to tarmac, I really felt like I'd been on an adventure within an adventure there, just because for like a day and a half, 2 days, I've been up in the mountains mixing with these mountain village people and going over rock falls on a sport, just things that it shouldn't do, and everything I thought the trip would be, it was bang, it was there. You know, I was going through it. So I would love to repeat that. Laos at that time, I don't know what it's like now, but 2013, it was still untouched in places. You could see it in some of the old capital city. I can't remember the name of it now, but you could see sort of the Western world starting to come in. I think there was a Burger King or something like that had arrived. But apart from that, it seemed quite untouched. So I'd love to go back and have a little slice of that. A week I've not done. Yeah, I don't want to say the same as you, Sam, but I really do like the thought of doing the Wild Atlantic Way, or I would also like to do the Dead Horse Road up at the top of Alaska, because I never got to Ushuaia or Dead Horse, and I would love to go back and do one of them at least.
Do it together, mate.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, I'd be well up for that. Just mint. I would love to do something like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We only made it up to Watson Lake. We got stuck in a vineyard in California helping out, and a visit turned into 6 weeks. Ages was food and wine. It was misery.
Yeah, I bet.
But by the time we got up to Watson Lake, it started snowing on the road in front of us. We just thought, nah, we're not kitted out for this. We're not good enough riders for it. So we made one of those difficult decisions that actually, let's go somewhere else.
Yeah. I was the same. I planned to do it, ran out of time, ran out of money, but I will do it. I will get back there. Lee, that was a fantastic question, mate. Thank you. Billy H, for both of us, once you got home from the Round the World adventure, did you find it hard to adjust back to normal day-to-day life?
Well, Bruce, I know that you did.
Yes, massively. Yeah, I have made no bones about it. I really struggled for probably well over a year, maybe even a year and a half, 2 years, to be honest. And what really helped was starting a YouTube again, because I really missed that. I really missed that interaction. In fact, I got back in middle of 2014. I didn't start the YouTube again till end of 2016. So yeah, just over 2 years. Yeah.
You have to feel inspiration to do something like this, though, don't you? Because if you don't, then everything's just going to be flat and boring. And I've sat and I've watched an awful lot of what you've been up to over the years, and it's never flat and boring. But that takes full on energy.
Yeah, I think I'm the type of person who is perfectly, I wouldn't say happy. I'm able and content to sit and do nothing. I can pass time with the best of them, but I also I also really like and need to have targets and things to aim for, something to drive me on, and the more outrageous that target is, the best. You know, prime example, you can never ride a Gixxer around the world. Well, I was like, well, Jacques done it, Nick Sanders has done it, I can do it. So yep. I like a challenge. I thrive on that. But coming back, for a lot of reasons, it was things like that mixture of emotions for me. It was like the round the world trip was it's all I'd focused on for 3-4 years before I went, and then you live it, don't you, for that entire. I mean, I was only away for 1.5 years. You were away for 8 years, so I can't fathom how hard that must still be to deal with.
When you come back from a big trip, you find that you're a stranger in your own land.
That's perfect. That sums it up to a T.
You've changed a lot, haven't you? And the longer you're away, not only do you change, but the country that you're coming home to, your home country, has changed a lot too. After the 8 years, there'd been hardly any dual carriageways away. When I came back with Birgit with me, itching to show her all of these lovely little towns and villages and all that sort of stuff, I couldn't find the blooming things. There were bloody great big dual carriageways around them all. So many times. But having said that, my map was a little bit out of date, so that made a difference. The way that I deal with coming back from a trip, particularly that trip, is I try to think about home being another country that I'm adding on to the end of the trip, but it's going to be a country that I'm in for longer. In other words, actually having changed helps, because the combination of me having changed and the UK having changed means that there are an awful lot of things that I don't know, things that I haven't seen before, things that I haven't had a go at before because it never occurred to me, or I thought I didn't have the ability, or whatever. So by adding another country on the end of the trip and going into it with the same attitude, actually it was fine. Yeah. It was just a really interesting thing to do. It makes a big difference, though, when you come back not in debt. I came back from that one trip I mentioned earlier horribly in debt, and I never do that again. We came back with enough money for us to bimble around and go and drink beer with our mates and have a bit of a catch-up. We had enough money to put down a deposit on somewhere to stay if we needed it. All of those sorts of things, so there was no real pressure on us when we got back. I mean, we did get straight into to work, and that also helped. But the other thing that I think helps an awful lot of people is when you're back and you've settled back in again, start planning the next trip. Yeah. Because the buzz of getting all of the thoughts, the maps out and the learning and everything else, especially with what you've learned from the last trip, great. It helps keep you sane.
Yeah, definitely. So having another thing to focus on and plan for. Yeah. It was interesting what you said about how everything's changed when you come back, and like you're a stranger in a strange land almost. For me, what really I remember really striking a chord with me, something I really noticed, was how much things hadn't or people hadn't changed. You know, for me, I came back into my old job, and I'm back stood on sentry post with people that I'd spent my life with beforehand, you know, and everyone was moaning about the same things, you know, everyone's moaning about the same people doing the same things, and they're all hacked off with this and hacked off with that. And I just found it really frustrating. You know, I want to grab people and go, well, bloody change it then, you know? And I think coming back into my old work environment, you couldn't, you know, you were powerless to change all that. You just had to conform and do your little bit. And I just found it really hard. It was like being thrown in a prison almost, and just not being allowed to be yourself. Yeah.
I totally understand that. And I think one thing that I learned to do is when I come back from a big trip is not to try and go back into the field that I was in before. And sometimes that means that I'm starting right down at the bottom with nothing on another huge learning curve. But of course, the roads taught me the value of learning curves, because I've changed so much, and I don't necessarily fit anymore because I've changed. And I was in retail management before I did the 8-year trip, and the thought of going back into retail management, I didn't think I could do it. There were certain aspects of the job that I loved and I got a real buzz out of doing, but there are other aspects that I just didn't. And I thought, I don't want to have to go back and deal with those things again.
Yeah.
So I carried on being a professional bum.
And it's interesting, I think, in that I don't know if it's a case of more people actually talk about this side of adventure travel, the sort of, dare I bring up the D word, but the depression side of it, that downside. Or is it just a case of, because I've gone through it, I'm more aware of it? But I remember before I did my trip, and I was at I was at Hub and mixing with all these people that had done it. No one was talking about this sort of doom and gloom when you get back. No, and I didn't know about that. And there was just one guy I met before I went away, a guy called Graham. He did Brain Rotting. I don't know if you've ever seen it. He did this series on YouTube called Brain Rotting, and he rode a motorbike around the Americas. And it's a fantastic series. When he got home, he happened to live in Bromley, same place I lived in at the time. So I dropped him a message and just said, I'm planning this trip. Any chance we can meet up for a beer and have a chat? And it was something he said to me at the time. He said, prepare for the biggest adventure and the biggest challenge when you get home. And I didn't appreciate that till I got back. Yeah.
I think it doesn't get talked about very much because people are too afraid of talking about it. Most people don't think that they will ever get depressed about something, and they don't want to think that they can ever get depressed about something. Depression has happened to people who are deficient for some reason or another, and too many people think about it like that. But depression can hit absolutely anybody, and it can smack people at the most unexpected of times. Full compassion to anybody who's going through that, because it's got to be tough. I am very, very lucky that I never have had to deal with it, but to a certain extent that's a matter of stupidity. I don't think
Oh, I love your attitude. I really do, Sam. I love it. Here's one that we always get asked. Stitch is asking, for both of us, what was the sketchiest encounter or situation you dealt with during your journey? Now, you've got quite a few.
How long have we got? Stitch, that's a good question, because you're going to come across sketchy moments when you're on a big journey. It's just they happen. And how you deal with them is what matters more than being afraid of them. Probably the sketchiest moment was crossing the border between Sudan and Ethiopia. I was traveling with an English couple, Mike and Sally. I'd met them on the ship going from Greece to Egypt, and we traveled on down through Egypt and Sudan together. And we were basically kicked out of Sudan because we managed to upset a brigadier general. I don't recommend it.
As you do.
Exactly. So there was we were suddenly finding ourselves at the end of the day crossing the border into Ethiopia, and I hate end of day border crossings. And we were going from an environment where the soldiers wore immaculate uniforms. The border pole was whitewashed. The flag pole was whitewashed. The flag hanging from the pole wasn't in tatters. There were no bullet holes anywhere. And we were crossing into a country that was just finishing 20 years of civil war. Most of the soldiers were old men or young boys. And the sense of aggression in the air there was unbelievable. There were bunches of kids to one side. And I didn't even notice at the time. It was only when I sat down to write my journal at the end of the day that I realised what the sideways vision had actually seen happening. These kids were tossing around a hand grenade like it was a tennis ball. And this was an environment that we'd just come into. And there were kids who were carrying AK-47s, but they couldn't carry them because they weren't strong enough to lift them. They were having to drag them in the dirt.
Wow.
But they were strong enough to lift them up and prop them on something so that they could shoot them. And ragtag bits of uniform and all of this sort of stuff. And I tell you what, there are some experiences from the age that make the hair on my arms and the back of my neck rise, and this is one of them. I'll never forget how sketchy this situation was. You know, Mike and I went into the kraal, which is basically a compound with sticks around the outside to as a first line of defence. And Sally stayed with the motorcycles outside because they were loaded up with the gear, and we thought, well, she'll be fine. She can just make sure that nobody nicks anything just by standing there. So Mike and I went in to try and deal with the paperwork. And when we got inside, it was just a mess. Scabby dogs lounging around, soldiers asleep all over the place. You could smell the alcohol, stacks of guns, where they sort of stand them pointing up like this. They were just pointing up like that all over the place. And we were shown into one of the huts, and it was pitch black inside. And when we were shown inside, just the air filled with flies. You could just, this monster bzzz noise from hundreds of flies. When our eyes got used to the darkness in there, we realised that there were soldiers sleeping in there, but there was a desk. And we were told, sit. The boss, he'll be back. And we sat, we waited. And then there was gunfire in the street. And of course, Mike and I just ran straight out because that gunfire was close. And there was Sally. She was lying on the ground, but with some of the boy soldiers lying on top of her. And she looked up at us and just yelled through the shooting, don't worry, they don't want to hurt me. They're just making sure none of the bullets hit me.
Wow.
Wow. And yeah, that was a fairly sketchy situation. Yeah.
It's Africa though, no? Africa is just... There's parts of Africa, I've got very limited experience there, but there's some parts that I've seen that are just amazing. The kindness and generosity of people is just... It's amplified by how little they have. In Morocco, you can meet these kids, young lads, who are always trying to, they're trying to hustle you to get you to go and see the Asud Falls, the waterfalls in Asud. They're trying to get you there because they get a little kickback off of somebody. That's how they make their living. And these lads, they have nothing. They live in the clothes that they wear. They sleep at the side of the road in the gutter because they have no home. They have nothing. And yet, even if you don't use their services to go there, and you ask, is there a hotel or somewhere like that, they'll help. These people will help. But then, I've also experienced the other side where, people are just, they don't care if you live or die. It's they're going to go out and make sure that they're okay and they get some money and they do something. And it's just such a volatile continent, isn't it? Like what's good in the morning can change by the afternoon, can't it? But that's all.
Is a land of complete extremes.
Absolutely.
Virtually anything can happen there. It's one of the reasons that I love it so much.
Absolutely.
There are some really gnarly situations there, but mostly there aren't. Mostly it's fantastic people. And, you never hear about the entrepreneurialism of Africans unless it's somebody dodgy from Nigeria who's created the prom that might have something to do with an email that popped into your inbox or words of that.
Yeah.
But, you meet some amazing people that are making their livings out of absolutely nothing, and they are so full of pride. They want nothing from anybody else. They want to do it themselves. Yet, if you're in trouble, as a foreigner, as a visitor, they'll give you everything they've got.
Absolutely.
And that is Africa. That's the real Africa that we just don't hear enough about.
Yeah. I think it was Nick Sanders that he told a story where he was on his R1 and he was literally, he broke down on the R1 and it was the middle of the night and he walked and found this village. And he said it was like stereotypical. It's in Black Africa, not Arab Africa, so it's down in the sort of middle. Can't remember which country it was. But he's gone into this village and it's the old mud huts that are there, and he's knocked on the door. A guy's opened the door. And he's basically managed to say to the guy that, you know, my bike is broken down, I need help. And this bloke took him into his home, and he slept there with this guy, and well, I assume it's his wife and his family and stuff. And in the morning they fed him and they took him back to his bike, and boom, 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 everything got sorted and that was done. And I remember Nick saying, I watched one talk that he gave, and I remember him saying he often wondered that if the shoe had been on the other foot and 3 o'clock on some wet morning during the night, if some black guy had knocked on his door, didn't speak English, would he have been as welcoming and hospitable as this chap was with his family? And that's always stayed with me. It's always struck a little chord. Yeah. For me, Africa, again, yeah, anyone that knows my trip knows the story. I got taken at the Rosso border. Wasn't pleasant. I look back and I often wonder, was it as bad as my mind tells me it was? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a movie, you know. I got put in a little concrete room, and 1 minute they're laughing and joking, offering us ice cold Coke, and the next minute they're doing the Russian roulette thing with a gun at my head, and you know, it's threatened to do all sorts. They didn't do anything, but it was all just to try and put pressure on to get you to take out insurance of all things. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous, but it was just to take out some insurance. And that was probably as sketchy as my trip got, really. I think more because after that I ended up back in the UK for a while, and then I got the opportunity to go again. After that, my mindset was just, I'm doing it. I am not giving up. I'm going to keep going. So I don't think I let my emotions get the better of me like I did in that time, in that environment in Mauritania. I very much succumbed to, oh my good God, what the hell is happening around me then, you know, and I think I've just made sure I never let myself do that again.
I think when you got there, you were still very young to the road.
Massively.
You were on full-on intake overload, and you said earlier on about getting dehydrated and hungry and things like that, and nobody reacts well to any situation when they're dehydrated and hungry. Yep. One of my favorite sayings is, eat well and sleep well, and you have a chance of traveling with a smile.
Yep.
And dealing with situations like that makes all of the difference. But how can you possibly conjure up an image in your mind before you get there that something like that could happen to you? And actually, do you want to do that? Because if you do, perhaps it'll make you so afraid that you'll never even take the risk of having a go.
Yep.
And I mean, I remember when you came back from that, and I was bitterly disappointed for you that it hadn't happened. And I remember you telling me about it, and I think we were at a show or something like that, and somebody was tugging on my sleeve, and we never really got a chance to talk about it until years later. But one of the things that I admired about you so much was that you came back, you sat down, you thought about it, and you made an alternative plan, and off you went again. And that, to me, is not a defeat. That, to me, is just pure common sense, because it doesn't matter where you travel in the world, things are going to go wrong in front of you.
Absolutely.
Are you going to get yourself in a really gnarly state and give up, or are you actually just going to change direction and go and do something else? And I think self-analysis when you're traveling is a really important thing to do, and a lot of people don't do enough of it. In that, am I really enjoying what I'm doing? What if I'm not? Why not?
Change it.
Okay, then why don't I do that instead? A good idea. Let's go.
Absolutely. I think being on the road, like this sort of dream that a lot of us have of a life on the road, it's just life. It's no different. It's just you're on the road. You're in a different country, so you might have different languages. You've got different cultures to deal with, and the unknown of not knowing your surroundings like you do when you're at home. But you've got the same things to deal with, haven't you? You know, where am I going to sleep? Am I safe? If I'm not safe, how do I make myself safe? Where do I eat? where do I go to the toilet? That's as bare bones as it is, isn't it? That's
where do I get my laundry done, and how do I pay that bill?
absolutely,
Because the bills are way all of the time. No, you're exactly right, and it's one of the things that Birgit repeatedly says to people who say to her, "What advice have you got?" And she says, "Well, it's just going to be another form of life, another form of living."
Yeah, and that the mentality I think that you develop once you've been on the road and done a trip like that, whereby you're problem solving, aren't you? You know, it's what's this issue? How do I remedy it? Bang, 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 bang. What is it? What's the outcome I want? Well, I think if you adapt that, or not even adapt it, if you just incorporate that into normal life, I mean, that's normal life here, isn't it? It's like, well, for me, what did I wasn't happy in my situation in my job. What do I want to do? I want to do this. How can I make that happen? Okay, boom. And it might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But for a trip like what we've done, if it's something that you want to do, then focus on that and figure out how you're going to make it happen and problem solve to get to that place where you want to be.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Sounds simple, isn't it? And that is a very simplistic breakdown of it, but that's all it is.
I mean, the road teaches you an awful lot of simplicity about things, doesn't it? Because you've got so much time to think about things.
Yeah.
I always conjure up the image of when I'm riding and I'm on my own and I'm in my crash helmet, is that I'm riding in a thought bubble.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of thoughts can be going in and out of my mind, and I'm having little discussions with myself and thinking about things that I'd never thought about before. Blimey, where did that thought come from? You know, all of that sort of stuff. And I love that. And a lot of the time when you start thinking things down to the basics, you realize, well, actually, they are basics. And there isn't a problem here. There's just a solution that I've just discovered because I thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very therapeutic being on the road, I think. Very therapeutic.
On a motorcycle in that thought bubble.
I've just seen the next question. Johnny Hackinson. This is a question all motorcyclists have been asking themselves for ages, and I hope one of you can give the answer. If Pinocchio says, "My nose is growing," what happens?
Johnny, it's not only motorcyclists that have this issue, it's fishermen as well, methinks. Mark Twain had a really nice saying that I like a lot, and he said, if you never lie, then you never have to worry about repeating yourself. And I think that's actually quite a good code to live by.
Wow, absolutely. God, yeah. Very true.
It works, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll not say I never lie, but I don't think I consciously go out there to lie, because I'm crap at it. I don't see the point in doing it. You know what I mean? If I've done something, yeah. If I've done something, then there's obviously a reason I've done it. So have the courage of your convictions to either stand by it or admit you're wrong. One or the other. Yeah.
I would make the world's worst poker player because
yeah, me no.
You know, in the police movies when they're interviewing the person, they've got them in the cell and so on, and they're analysing which way the person's eyes go. Yeah. I tell you what, my eyes would just be fixed to the left-hand side.
Looking down like that. Yeah, Johnny, good question. Don't know what you've been smoking, but good question. Simon Dufton basically said he's known you and Birgit for many years. Loves the pair of you to death, and his question for you is, where is book number 5?
Well, likewise, Simon, and thank you very much for asking me this question, you bastard.
I think it's in the post. Yeah.
Not really. It's something that I thought about a lot over the years. Now, the answer to this could be awfully long, but I'm going to keep it as short as possible. The reality is, when you self-publish a book, you have to do everything. You have to learn about absolutely everything, and it takes you a long time. And all of the promotion that you do, you have to do it yourself. You have to work out how not to become a repetitive bore in people's faces. So you're constantly looking, and it takes up a huge amount of time. And some people have seen my books, and some people have read them, and some people are saying nice things about them. But there's an awful lot more people out there who've never heard of them. Never heard of this bloke, Sam Manicom, never heard that he falls off his bike a lot and has his testicles poked and all of the rest of it. And it takes time to get the word out, and it's constant work. That's an excuse The reality is I spent quite a lot of time over the last year working with new authors. There are quite a lot of people out there who are itching to write books, and the technology is there now to make it possible for them to do it. It's so different even to when I first started. When my first book came out, it was just on the cusp of it changing from vanity publishing to self-publishing. And I'm so glad I didn't have to vanity publish, because that would have just been awful. But it's a title. But it's all the stuff that goes along with it as well. Now, if somebody has got a story that they want to tell it, share that story, give people the chance to learn from what you've learned from, give people the chance to laugh too, but anyway, you get my drift. So I've been using some of the skills, things that I've learned along the way, things that other people have taught me, as a way of payback to those people by helping other people. And that's taken quite a lot of time. Now, I hope that all of these guys' books do get published. If they don't, well, that's their decision. But I've enjoyed helping them, but it takes up an awful lot of time. Having said that, I am working on the next book. I have been since December. It's a slow process. I'm a very, very slow writer. And who knows when it'll come out? It might be next year sometime. I don't know. Whatever I do, I don't want to produce something that I'm not incredibly proud of. And yeah, so I'm slow, but I hope I get there in the end. The trouble is, I keep getting distracted. There's so much good stuff going on. Yeah, anyway, that's me sidetracking again. Thank you, Simon.
I've just got into audiobooks, and I've downloaded your first one actually at the moment, so I'm in the middle of that. But yeah, audiobooks, I love that. It's a really, I'm no good at sitting down with a book. I've always got other things to do, and especially more so now than ever. You know what it's like. I've got video editing, then the social media. I'm constantly doing that. But now with an audiobook or like a podcast, things like this, you can, when you're jumping on a bike, or if you're on the train or you're on the bus, you can just have it playing out your phone into your headphones, and both. I love it. And your audiobooks are brilliant. I love listening to you talk anyway. So I'll leave links down below.
Thank you. That's really nice.
No
the audio came about because people who'd read the books were writing to me and saying, Sam, why not put your books into audiobook formats? And I just thought, yeah, okay. I'll get to it. It's another monster pile to have to learn about.
Yep.
But also the finishing touch was when, after a series of shows, the NEC in particular, the number of people that came up to me when I was standing there book signing and said, had a good old chat with me, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes. And at the end, I'd say to them, so words to the effect of, you're going to buy a book then? And the number of people that said to me, Sam, I'd love to, but it's been great talking to you, but I can't read. What?
Wow.
You can't read? And to begin with, I just thought, blimey, the education system in this country is really, really getting bad if this many people are telling me they can't read. But then the penny dropped one day when a guy said to me the next sentence, and he said, Sam, I can't read. I'm really badly dyslexic. Reading a book is an impossible task for me. He said, I can't even read road signs. My wife has to tell me how long words are so that I know when to go left or right as I'm riding my motorcycle. And I ride a motorcycle because it's something that I can do, which gives me a huge grin, doesn't make me feel disadvantaged. And yeah, it's an absolute buzz. Have you ever thought about putting your books in audiobook format? And that was when the penny finally dropped and started work on it. And so, they were done for the number of people that really battle with reading. And I subsequently discovered that a lot of them are listened to by people who are busy, like you've just said, or people who have got long road trips. I was a little bit gobsmacked when the chap got in touch with me one day and he said, Sam, we were all on a family holiday. It was a driving holiday across Europe. And my 8-year-old son and my 9-year-old daughter were in the car and we played into Africa. And I thought, no, there's really gnarly stories in there. Ooh, gosh, I hope you realised. And he said, my kids are old enough to need to know that this sort of stuff happens. And then the conversation carried on. But audiobooks, they're good fun. And there's some really good ones around now, aren't there? Really good.
I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan's. I listen to it's part of the reason why I started this podcast was I love the long form content, and he had this chap on who has written a book about Charles Manson, the Charles Manson murders, and he did like a 22-year investigation into the whole situation behind Charles Manson. So all about the CIA involvement and everything like this, and it was fascinating. Well, he has an audiobook, so I've bought that, and I was listening to that before I bought your book. So yeah, I love them just because you can crack on with things and just have it playing, you know, so you're almost ticking two things off at once, aren't you?
I had an email from a lady one time and she said, "Dear Sam, washing up has never been so interesting."
Yeah.
Well, no, that works. Yeah. Can I do a little bit of a plug here? Would you mind?
Of course, go on.
The plug is for a man called Roger Chatterton, who runs Kite Studios in Cambridge. Now, I spent 2 years of writing to the various different recording studios around the UK that I could find recorded audiobooks. And most of them didn't bother to reply. And the ones that did said, "Are you an actor or a professionally trained narrator?" And well, no, I'm not an actor, and I'm definitely not a professionally trained narrator. So no, we're not going to do it. Sorry, bye. And after 2 years, I was beginning to think, gosh, you know, I'm running out of people that I can do this with. Have I wasted all of this time, or has it just been an unexpected adventure that I've learned from? What's next? So I was in the Ace Cafe, wonderful old Ace Cafe, love that spot, having a full English breakfast on one of the bench tables. And everybody who's been to the Ace Cafe knows exactly what I'm talking about, both in full English breakfast and bench table. And you end up sitting next door to people that you don't know, never met before, but it doesn't matter. And this chap and I got talking after a while. And after about 10 minutes of conversation, really just nice general motorcycling, what's the weather like type of conversation, he turned around to me and he said, "You're Sam, aren't you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah," thinking, okay, what's coming next? And he said, "I read your book Into Africa and I really liked it. Have you ever thought about putting it into audiobook format?" Well, my first reaction was, sigh. Do I tell him about the whole 2 years worth of effort? Or do I just say, "God, that's a really interesting thought. Thanks very much." But I thought, well, actually, you know, we've been getting on so well together. Why don't I tell him in brief what's been going on? So I told him in brief. And he said, "Well, tell you what, I'm the managing director of a recording studio. How about you come up and we'll record the first chapter and see if you're rubbish or not. If you are, it'll be my pleasure to tell you so." And bang. Thank goodness for the Ace Cafe and bench tables.
Awesome.
Because, that's how they started, because he took the gamble. I'm not a professionally trained narrator, and I'm not an actor. But he was prepared to give me a go, and that's one of the things that I love about this motorcycling world of ours. So many of us are prepared to give each other a go. It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. It brings out the best in people, doesn't it?
It really does.
And that was Roger, was that right?
Yeah, a Kite Studio in Cambridge. Super guy.
Top man. Right, next question. Otto Bennett. I think we've kind of touched on this already. Question for both of us. How has travelling around the world changed you? As in your worldview or your own temperament, that sort of things. For me, it's kind of put me back in touch with who I think I was before I became very sceptical and suspicious of everybody. And I think I'm much more open to people and I'm much more trusting than I was, definitely. But I'm also very, this isn't just because of world travel, it's my old job as well. I'm hugely skeptical of what the media tell me and what I hear on the grapevine without personal experience of it. Yep. You know, two sides to every story, at least two sides to every story.
Yep, absolutely better. Too right. I'm calmer. I'm much steadier. I'm much more open-minded. I'm hungry to know more. I don't take things at face value. I'm much more willing to look for the possibilities. I'm much more likely to say, well, why not? Instead of looking for the reasons why not. I have a real intense dislike of ignorant bigotry. because so much of that gets spouted from people's mouths who haven't got a clue. They've heard it from somebody else who's heard it from somebody else.
Yeah.
And the hate that ignorant bigotry breeds in this world is just shocking. And it's such a waste of energy and opportunity.
Yeah.
And what you just said about, the media, for example, some of the mainstream media just should be embarrassed, completely embarrassed at what it does. All this focus on repetitive hammering away at doom, gloom and disaster instead of proper reporting like it used to be done. Well, what's the build up to this? What's the actual situation now? What's the thought that might happen next? And then what actually does happen next? Come back to it and talk about it again, because all we tend to get is 2 or 3 days of hammering away at us with some form of negativity, lots of pundits saying what they think, and very, very little in-depth research and fact. And I just think that's such a waste of time and energy for all of us. And I think a lot of the woes in the world today come from the fact that so much of that happens.
Yeah.
Oh dear, I've suddenly got on a soapbox. Sorry.
No, but you're 100%. You're 100% right in my book. It's the mainstream media, the news, and things like that. It's no matter which camp you come from, there's always a political reason for it. There's always a taint of it. It's not, they don't report the facts. It's somebody's interpretation of it, and whatever inkling they have to taint that viewpoint that they have, and then that then gets reported as fact, and it's not fact. It really gets my goat.
It's a marketing rule. If you say something at least 3 times, then people start to believe it's true.
100%.
So buy my books, buy my books, buy my books. I'm just joking with it. You get what I mean, and that's what happens with too much of the mainstream media now.
Yeah.
Repeat enough, people start to think it's true.
Yeah.
Also, I hope we didn't disappoint you with the angle we suddenly headed off on with that. But the point is, the more you travel, the more you realise that actually a lot of what you see in the press is, it's just not all of the truth. No. There's a bigger truth out there.
Absolutely, yeah. Don't believe anything until you see it with your own eyes. That's what I always think, Yeah, that's kind of how I take it now. I'll listen to people I trust. I'll listen to, and I'll listen to anyone's point of view. But like you said, I'm intensely annoyed by ill-informed or just plain ignorant viewpoints on something. They've got no experience of it. They actually have no hard facts to base that opinion on. I really get annoyed when people start spouting this viewpoint and there's no fact behind it, no basis behind it. Yeah. I think social media is fantastic in so many ways. It brings people together. It gets truth out there because it's actual people that are reporting it. But conversely, that very same facet of it spreads so much misinformation and so much downright hatred at times because it's people out there that are putting it out there. So you get the best and the worst, don't you, of that same medium? Yeah,
that's right. I mean, there have been some forums that I just pulled away from because in the end, that's just all that was happening with them. And I just got bored with it. It wasn't interesting to me anymore. On Facebook, I've only unfriended 2 people because of their political spoutings ever since I've been on Facebook, because if it's being said, then I want to know about it, whether I disagree with it or not. I want to know. I want to know what's being said. I think one of the happiest things in this world of ours is to be able to live in a democracy. And if you live in a democracy, that involves talking to each other. Because when you talk to each other, you may start off at completely opposed extremes. But if you talk to each other and you listen as well as talk, then actually you end up working out a common path that works for everybody. You stop listening and it just becomes pure hatred. And what a waste of time and energy in this amazing world of ours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, why can't you have opposing viewpoints on a certain topic, but you can still be decent people? You can still get along, can't you?
Absolutely. I think you're barking mad to have ridden the bike that you did around the world. You might think that I'm barking mad to have done what I did. Okay, That's fine. But we're still motorcyclists. We still enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
Why are we going to let that one thing get in the way? And actually, I fully respect you and admire you for it. But I still think
Thank you. Yeah, right. That's enough politics. Let's get off politics. Right. Right, Nick Turnbull. There's a big paragraph here. Sorry, I'll just have a quick skim read of it, Sam. I should have pre-read all this. You're both round the world travellers and have enjoyed reading and watching your journeys, and many others in their own unique way. However, is there now a risk that with so many people dropping... remember this one, Nick? Yeah. With so many people dropping everything and doing their own adventure, the whole concept of round the world travel is becoming a bit passé. If not, why not? And if so, how can future travellers raise their game in a time of rising world tensions, climate change, and now pandemics? So world travel, is it just becoming, it's a thing?
No, I don't think it is. When I was heading for Thailand, I met a chap who said, do you know, it's really not worth your while going to Thailand now. If you'd gone 12 years ago, it would have been fantastic. You'd love it. Well, I got to Thailand and it was brand new to me, and I found all sorts of stuff that just amazed and enthralled me. So I loved being in Thailand. And, somebody's bringing you a cold beer.
Thank you, Mrs. Teapot. Thank you. Cheers. Okay, dear, no worries. Thank you very much. Sorry now.
One of those me as well. That's all right.
There's two here for you, yeah. Sorry, yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, so I think that what's happening now is because we've got technology, is that it looks as if there are an awful lot more people going around the world or riding lengths of continents and so on than there actually really are.
Yeah.
I have no idea how many people have actually ridden around the world. Mark Holmes, the author Mark Holmes, he's actually doing a survey at the moment to try and work out how many people really have ridden around the world. And I don't know what the current billion population is of the world, but it's incredible.
Yeah.
But maybe 1,000 people have ridden around the world.
Is that all it is?
No idea. But you think about how many people you know with what you do and how long you've been doing it that have actually ridden around the world. There are quite a lot of people that have ridden across Asia or have ridden the length of Africa or ridden in America.
Yeah.
Fantastic trips, absolutely amazing. But having ridden around the world, I don't know that there are actually that many. It'll be very interesting to see what Mark comes up with.
Yeah, I saw his post. Mark's a chap that he rode a Triumph Rocket. Was it right down the length of Africa?
He rode around the world.
Was it around the world on the rocket? Yeah, it's a fascinating story he does. He gives presentations at like the Overland event and things like that, or NEC show, the London Excel show, that sort of stuff. So it's well worth listening to him.
And his book, which P for Brain here can't remember the title of at the moment, but you can hunt it out. It's exactly how a motorcycle travel book should be. Completely different to the last one. Yeah. And it's a fascinating book. Hunt it out if you can. Yeah,
it's a very touching story. I think everyone has a story, don't they? That what made them, or the impulse that took them on their journey. And Mark's is particularly emotional, I think. Is probably the best way to describe it. So it's well worth having a little dig there, folks. Have a look. Mark Holmes, Triumph Rocket 3 Round the World. Just Google it, and if you can, get your hands on the book.
Nice one. Going back to Nick's question, I think the advent of so much technology has affected things in a different way, in that edgy stories as well as beautiful stories sell. So you hear an awful lot of edgy stories. And hey, we've been telling a few on this, haven't we? Which people can see. But hopefully we've balanced that out with enough happy stories and put the scary stories that we've been telling in their reality box, for want of a better way of putting it. So I think that people tend to become more afraid of doing it. But I think that also people are more afraid of making mistakes than they used to be, and maybe that's something to do with the way that people are being brought up now. You see these jokey cartoons on social media where mum's having to drag the kid who's got his expanded muscle thumbs from playing on his Xbox or whatever, versus the kid who's being having to drag back in with grubby knees and tears and dirt on his shorts.
Yep.
And I think that the less people get out and make mistakes as they're growing up, the more fear there is. And I think that does mean that there is one of the changes that's happening in the world. But I think that actually it's not a case that there are more rising tensions in the world. I think that there is just an awful lot more soundbite reporting on it. And I'm not going to say any more because we've just been covering that in depth. I think also one of the realities that anybody who goes traveling has to remember is be kind. Help somebody. Yeah. A friend of mine stuck indoors during the COVID-19, and he sent me an email. We were having a bit of a discussion backwards and forwards, and he sent me an email about how he copes with his day. And I'm just going to glance sideways because I pinned it up. It's such a good way of living in general, and actually as a travel thing, it's good. So he said, exercise every day. So important when you're sitting on the back of a motorcycle for so much of it. Get off your bike and walk around. And when you have a backside rest every 50 miles or whatever you decide is best for you, don't just stand by your bike. Go walking for 10 minutes. Have a stride up and down the side of the street. It'll bring your body back to life again, and that means that you'll be focusing on what's happening and the possibilities and the risks that much better. So exercise. Do a kindness for somebody every day. And most of us, I think we're all naturally kind, but make a point of doing something kind for somebody else. It's quite an interesting exercise to do, is physically actually hunt out an opportunity to be kind to somebody. It's one of the things that changes your mindset when you're traveling that makes traveling so much more fun. Be grateful for one thing every day. And sometimes when the poos hit the fan and you're really battling with day after day after day, finding things to be grateful of each day suddenly help you keep things in perspective and in reality. So I like that one a lot. Achieve something every day. This is a good one, and that's real life or on the road. Every time that you achieve something, you have a feel-good factor about it, and that can make your day a happier place to be. Praise somebody. What a nice thing to be doing. When you meet somebody or you see somebody doing something nice, be it giving money to a beggar or picking somebody's bag up when they've dropped it or whatever it is, take a moment out to just go and say, that was really nice of you. The feel good for yourself as well as for the person who's just been kind, that's great. It's such
absolutely. Yep.
And fix something every day. Well, of course, when we're on the road, there's always going to be something that needs fixing. And if you do that every day, then the chances of your bike lasting your whole trip rather than breaking down frequently dramatically increased. So it's kind of a nice list, isn't it? And although it's working for him going through the COVID-19 situation, it's a great thing for being on the road too.
It's just I think that's just perfect to apply to everyday normal life, just life, whether you're on the road or at home. I love that. I love it. There's not a single thing I'd argue about in there. Perfect. I love Nick this. It's awesome.
Nick was asking something about whether the pandemic and that sort of thing is going to change travel. Yeah, it has to. It has to. Until there's a vaccine, there are going to be all sorts of restrictions in place, and people who don't know that they're vulnerable will be vulnerable, and they'll take the risk and they'll go out and travel and find, okay, this isn't good. Yeah. Or they'll be running the risk of carrying it and passing it on to somebody else who's just been amazingly kind to them, or whatever else it is. Yeah. Mental attitude as a result of COVID-19 has to change. Pandemics have been around before and people have had to adapt. Human beings can adapt. I think this one seems to be particularly nasty, and I think that until there's a vaccine around, then it is going to make travel very difficult. And I think it'll go in the direction of when we are allowed to travel from one country to the next, each country is going to demand that we have a certificate, an absolutely current, just made certificate saying that we're not infected before we're allowed into a country. I think some countries will insist that we go into a quarantine station for 2 weeks before we're allowed loose in the country. And so I think that those things are all very much likely on the cards. Am I worried about it? Well, no, it's just like another problem that the road is going to throw up that has to have a solution to it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like getting a visa, isn't it? Some countries you have to get a visa before you go in, and some of these visas are particularly bureaucratic and time consuming to get. It's just something you're going to have to deal with in order to make your plan happen.
And I think the key thing for any overlander to remember is whatever you do, don't do something that could kill somebody else. How could you live with yourself if you did that? When you're out exploring and seeing the wonders of the world, no. The two things don't go together.
Yeah, there's something you said there about, okay, you might be all right, but you might be carrying it. And someone that shows you that amazing act of generosity by welcoming you into their home, well, they might not have whatever it is that you have that protects you from it, and then you then pass it on to them, and the worst happens. I totally get that. I do totally, and I think I've not become blasé at all, because I'm still stuck inside here, and I'm still very aware of what's going on with the virus and stuff. But I've found myself over the last week or two, again probably because of the media, I found myself starting to think, it's not something I need to worry about. It's not as bad as they thought, But okay, it's not been bad for me, and everyone I know that has got it has either brushed it off or been pretty bad for a week, and then they've come back. But there are 38,000 people in this country alone who didn't make it, and that suddenly sits home, doesn't it? I was looking at the statistics yesterday. I think we're the worst in the world for the death rate. Our death rate ratio is the worst in the world. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't comprehend that.
It's yeah. I mean, we can get on political soapboxes again here.
We're doing it again.
But one of the things that bothers me a lot about what's happening with this is that we're hearing very, very little reporting on what happens to people after they have been hit by the virus. Yes, they've recovered, but what's happened to them after? And I have some personal experience with family and with some friends about this, and they were really badly knocked by it. Yeah. It wasn't a case of, I've got flu-like symptoms and I can't taste things quite so well, and I'll go to bed for a week and I'm fine. These people have actually been hit. So 7-8 weeks later, they're coming out of it, but they're completely exhausted, absolutely wiped out. And nobody knows how long that feeling is going to go on for. Yeah. And we hear very, very little about that. We're also hearing very little about how the virus is hitting other body functions, and what the long-term effect of that is. And I think that the lacking of reporting on those two things is is part of what's making people feel, okay, it's 3 months now, and
next.
I'm bored, and the weather's nice. Let's go out.
No, I get that.
Oh dear, I'm being awful, aren't I? I'm just constantly thinking about things like that. Sorry.
No, but
Edit it out.
I think this is the beauty of this type of medium, of long form content like this. People invest in it. You're in this for the long game, whether it's an hour chat or a 3-4 hour chat, and this is normal conversation. This is what two normal people chat about, especially when you're going through a pandemic. The pandemic's going to come up, isn't it? So I mean, don't apologise about that. No, not at all. But we will do our best to steer clear of the C word, politics and religion from now on. Can't promise it, but we'll do our best. Right, Andy Horton, question for us both. Have you ever travelled somewhere that you looked forward to visiting and then arrived and thought, what a shithole, let's get out of here?
Oh, you can answer that one first, Bruce.
Wow. Somewhere that I got to and I thought, there's a place. I mean, Mauritania, yes, but that was just for a whole multitude of different reasons. It was my first taste of being well outside the developed world. You know, I was well outside my comfort zone. It was incredibly hot. I was in a leather suit. I didn't drink enough. I nearly died of sunstroke in the desert. You know, I snapped the frame of the bike. I got chased at gunpoint numerous times. So all those factors sort of taint my viewpoint of that country. But then Steph Jevons, she went through, I think, a week or 2 weeks after me. She was literally no more than 2 weeks after I went through, she went through, and she had no problem at all. So you just don't know, do you? It's just one of those things. A place I didn't particularly enjoy was Java, you know, the North Island on Indonesia. No, Sudan. No, not Sudan. Sumatra. I'll get the right place. Sumatra, the Northern Island. Oh, you've gone there, Sam. I can't hear your audio.
Yep. How's that?
All right, got you now. Sorry.
I was just very quiet and...
Apologies. Yes, Sumatra, the Northern Island of Indonesia, it was incredibly hot. It was one long traffic jam, and I had practically no interaction with the people, and that's my fault. I didn't give myself time to meet people. I just put my head down, arse up, and rode to get through it. So I was in traffic, I was in heat, it was humid as hell, and I just didn't enjoy it. So I would like to go back there and spend more time and meet people. Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, Indonesia for me was a funny place to be because the day before I was supposed to fly out from Australia to and then connect with my bike in Indonesia. The day before all this was supposed to happen, I was supposed to be down the docks and getting the bike final paperwork sorted out and then flying out. So the bike was going to head up into Indonesia, and I was going to fly to Germany to link up with Birgit. We'd met in New Zealand. She was riding a bicycle there, and we just clicked. And I wasn't looking for a girlfriend, and she certainly wasn't looking for a boyfriend like me. But you know how it is.
Yep, that's when it happens.
Exactly, and fantastic. I got to the top of Australia, and we'd been writing to each other, and just amazing letters. And I just thought, hang on a minute, you've got to find out whether there really is something going on. So I bought this ticket to fly to Germany so that we could see, and so that I could see her in her home environment rather than on the road environment, and we could spend some proper time together, etc., etc. Yeah, well, not romantic at all, because I slipped a disc. And the doctor told me I'd never ride a motorcycle again, etc., etc. It was a long, painful experience, but hey, that's life. But I ended up backpacking through Indonesia instead of riding my motorcycle, and I was gutted that had happened. But it did mean that I was walking around and in shorts and a t-shirt, and it did mean that I was carrying a rucksack, and I didn't have the responsibility of a motorcycle, and I was using local transport and all of those sorts of things. So the complete opposite to what you ended up having to deal with. And yeah, it was hot and it was humid, and riding in bike gear in that traffic can't have been a very comfortable experience without taking good long breathers where you go and lie on a white sand beach for 3 days and just mentally chill out. And that must have been really harsh.
I remember, like, it is Sumatra, isn't it? The North one, the North Island with Medan, that's Sumatra. I just remember that being an endurance. I had to endure that to get through. And then crossing into Java, the next one, and I had to go to, what's the capital in Java? Indonesia, Jakarta.
Yep.
Yeah, I had to meet some people in Jakarta Oh my God, the traffic there. I've never ridden in India, but I've been told the traffic in Jakarta is as close as you'll get to like India. It was, and it's an entire city of traffic jam. That's all it is. It's just, there's no room left on the road. So all the mopeds are on the pavement, and it's just a free-for-all, just a total free-for-all in like 100% humidity and 125-degree heat. So that was an experience. But then once I got through Java, I got to Bali, and then from Bali down, it's just paradise, just absolute paradise. And then doing the ferry hopping from all the islands. Oh man.
Good for you.
Oh, it's like a storybook country. It's just beautiful. Again, it's like somewhere someone's painted. It's just amazing.
Stop it, please. You're making me want to go and get on a plane.
I'll tell you a little story about the story time. A little story about Indonesian ferries. I'm on the 24-hour ferry that takes you, I think, is it from Florin? Is it Florin to West Timor? It's a 24-hour ferry, and I'm there lying on my little mattress in amongst everybody else, and I'm watching people just throw their rubbish over the side into the sea. And that really, in Africa, that hacked me off, the way people just dump their rubbish. And, you know, I understood in Africa there weren't bins, there's not bin men there, but they're just trashing this beautiful place. But then in Indonesia, on these boats, there's bins, and I'm like, why aren't you using the bloody bin? So I was making a point of getting up and putting my stuff into the bins, thinking, I'm on my moral high ground here. I will lead the way, heal the world. Well, we get to the port and the ferry is docking, and all the staff come out and they start tidying everywhere up, and they get all the black bin bags out the bins, walk to the side of the boat and throw them all in the sea. I was just like, what? Sums it up, really, doesn't it? Yeah.
I had a very similar experience of that on the train in India. I was travelling with a German guy, and he went to throw his stuff out of the window. No glass in the windows. And that's what the locals have been doing. And I said to him, mate, we know better than this.
Yeah.
The locals were doing it because they had gone from the days of the cups that they were drinking their chai or their coffee out of, having been made by the potter who sat at the end of the platform. And these things were just baked in the sun, and they'd last long enough for you to drink your tea. Yeah. And then you would bin it out windows, biodegradable. The plates that you got your curry and rice served to you on were made out of leaves that had been stitched together and dried in a mould. Wow. So you had the bowl shape. When you finished, you just binned it out of the window. Yeah. Well, this is now the times of polystyrene and tin foil, and it's all going out of the window. And the locals just hadn't grasped. So we collected all of our stuff in a carrier bag, and the locals in our compartment were looking at us as if to say, "You're extreme. You are." So, and at the different railway stations, small boys, most of them were orphans. They would come on with their brushes made out of palm leaves, and they would scoot around, and for a few rupees, they would clean around your feet. And so we thought, well, you know, these kids, there's paper in here, there's plastic in here, there's tin foil in here. And we both knew that people made their livings with recycling in India, particularly people at the level of the boys. So we gave this lad the carrier bag full of everybody's waste. And he looked inside and looked up at me, looked up at my mate, went over to the window and emptied it out the window.
No.
Almost identical story, but that's just because people don't know, and we have to go. And I know it sounds awfully pompous, but lead by example. The penny will drop sooner or later.
At some point, yeah. At some point, cool. Have you seen? Oh God, what is the guy called? There's this young chap from. I can't remember what country it is, Switzerland or somewhere like that. Is it Bochum? Basically, so this young guy's like an engineering marvel, and he has created this mechanism. He's identified that most of the world's plastic pollution in the seas It comes from 5 main rivers around the world. So what his plan is, and it appears to be working, is he's developed these floating sort of factories that sit on these rivers right near the estuary points, and they basically just allow the current and the tidal action of the river washes plastic straight into these machines, and they automatically gather it all up, and it's, once a skip is full, it's automatically taken away and it goes into recycling. And it's already having an effect on the plastic waste. He's been interviewed on Joe Rogan a couple of times, and you think, wow, I mean, this kid is like 22, 23 years of age, and he's been working on this for...
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I mean about people will get it. We spend too much time thinking that people in developing world countries are stupid. Well, they're far from it.
Yeah.
They're just dealing with the conditions that they've got to deal with. And it only takes somebody to come up with a genius idea, and then for them to get some encouragement, some recognition and some funding, and then bang, off they're going.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to see, isn't it?
Yeah.
And my goodness, we certainly aren't perfect in the UK for what we do with our rubbish.
Certainly not.
I've been seeing some photos over the last few days about beauty spots that have been completely trashed. It's sad.
Really gets my goat, that. People, there's no excuse in this country to drop your litter. There's just no excuse for it.
None at all.
Yeah. Anyway, right, last 2 questions here on... I've just seen the time. We've been at this for 2 hours, 15 minutes, Sam. Are you all right for time at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Let's keep rolling.
Awesome. Am I still recording? Yeah, I think I am. Right, Eddie Goldspink. He said he's also had the pleasure of meeting you, and what a top man. A couple of questions for both of us. How do you deal with any frustrations with bureaucracy and the various personalities you encounter at borders? Do you see any different behaviours in yourself, positive or negative, when travelling compared to when you were back home? Borders.
Answering that question last bit first, no. Because the things that I've learnt on the road have affected how I deal with everyday life at home.
Yep.
In the same way. The roads taught me an awful lot of things. So the first thing is, when you've got a border crossing coming up, if you go into it and you're properly prepared, as in you found out, and we can do that now, what sort of paperwork they're going to require at that border crossing, and we've got it ready and it's properly filled in, and we've got the right number of photocopies, and we can do all of that now, then that is the first step. It's preparation. Let your common sense sing, because it's such an underestimated sense. Just go into every border crossing with your common sense working on full bore, because you will see things, you will analyse what you're seeing if you're using common sense, and they will stop being frustrations. They will just become the way it is. Treat everything and everybody with respect until they prove that they don't deserve it, because you never know who you're actually going to be dealing with. There was one border crossing in Africa. There was a beggar by the side of the street where I'd parked my motorcycle. Now, I was going to border crossings with a bag of boiled sweets or a bag of biscuits. It used to be a carton of cigarettes, and I'd hand out the cigarettes. Well, I'd share them, not a carton, but a packet. Then I got onto biscuits and boiled sweets. Well, this guy looked hungry, so I gave him a handful of biscuits, and he looked up at me and he said, "This is the first kind thing somebody has done to me for weeks."
Wow. And
I was amazed that this guy spoke English as well as he did. So anyway, we stood and we had this conversation. I really wasn't in a hurry. And we stood and we chatted for about 15 minutes. Anyway, then I said, well, look, I better go and get on with this. And when I got into the customs office, an officer came out to me and he said to me, "I see you've been talking to my brother-in-law. He's not all there, but thank you for showing him respect. You come with me. We'll deal with your paperwork." Just because I had treated a stranger with respect, and you never know what the knock-on effect's going to be. So treat everybody with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. Border crossings, you can help yourself an awful lot by arriving as soon as they open in the morning. So if that means stay at a town nearby the night before, then do so. If you get to a border first thing in the morning, there are so many things that are going for you. If they want to play silly buggers with you, well, then they can all day, and you can let them. If you turn up at a border crossing at the end of the day, then they know the clock is ticking on you, And that means that you've put yourself under pressure and you've made yourself vulnerable. So get there first thing in the morning. And the other reason that that's a good thing is because these guys, the officials, they haven't been hassled by numpties all day with silly questions and not having the right paperwork and all of the rest of it. So the chance of you going through in a much more chilled, relaxed atmosphere, leaps and bounds first thing in the morning. The next thing is shake hands. Shake hands with everybody. It doesn't matter who they are. Shake hands with kids, shake hands with officials, shake hands with the person standing in the queue next door to us, whatever it is. It's a great feeling. And there's just this buzz about you as a person when you're dealing with all of these things that make people think, oh, I'll help them. Because you've just treated them all with respect and with warmth and friendliness. It doesn't matter whether you know nothing in common language with Wise, but that handshake pays you dividends all over the place. Be calm and friendly. Don't let anything get up your nose. Somebody might be behaving like a complete arse. Well, let them. It's interesting to watch what's happening and to see what's going to happen next by you not retaliating in like. Spitting a hissy fit and all of the rest of it doesn't work.
Nope. I've done that.
It just doesn't work. You dig yourself a bigger hole. It's much better to be gently firm. Yeah. Sometimes being the ignorant tourist and I really don't understand what the hell you're talking about, mate, that pays off too.
That's not how we do it in my country. Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Border crossings are interesting, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I hated them initially when I didn't know what I was doing, and I couldn't understand in my eyes, the illogical way it was. I didn't get it. It's like what, like you know when you have to pay a little tax to get in this queue rather than that queue, and I need to pay that person $1 to photocopy it when I can photocopy it perfectly well. But it's all the system. It's a thriving industry, isn't it? In a lot of these borders, that's how people make their living.
It is, and it's working out who's the merchant who wants to take advantage of you because you're the one who's looking vulnerable, and the one who's just doing the job.
Absolutely.
Earning a living. And you might be the only person that day who needs 10 photocopies of whatever else document it is. Everybody else may need one. So that $1 that you're giving, that may be the main earner for them and their family from that day.
Absolutely. Another big thing, I mentioned this right at the start, was I didn't realise how badly affected I was by being dehydrated. In particularly, dehydration's a biggie with me. I lose all patience and reasoning and logic. So what I found myself doing if I knew a border was coming up was making sure I got plenty of water on board and had water with me so that I could keep drinking, because sometimes you are there for a couple of hours and, you know, if you can't get out the sun and you're sat there for a couple of hours frustrated, then you need to keep that water going in you, because otherwise, like me, I would just get narky. I'm not a nice place to be, not a nice person when I'm...
Well, I mean, that's absolutely right. And one of the things that I do is I carry what I call my walkaway bag. And that tends to be my tank bag, which is either a shoulder bag made out of heavy-duty canvas with wire through the shoulder strap so nobody can come up behind me and snip it and that sort of stuff. Or it's my tank bag. What I've got in that is a couple of bottles of water, a paperback, my carnet, my photocopies, something to eat, those biscuits or boiled sweets that I was talking about earlier on, those sorts of things. And then I can walk away from the bike and I've got everything that I need just to keep me ticking along and to help keep me calm. And the time that you start celebrating with something like one of these is, of course, when you make it through the other side and you made it to your hotel that night. And try the local food. This terrible, disgusting things, but you never know until you've tried them.
Fantastic, Slange. Right, last question on Instagram. Not Instagram, on Patreon. Mike on a bike. When taking on an epic journey, has there ever been a time when you felt overwhelmed and almost given up on it? Well, me, yes, and I did, but thankfully got back to it. We've already covered that. What about you, Sam?
Hello, Mike. No, not really. things don't tend to faze me that much, and I'm kind of a laid back, lazy sort of guy when I'm dealing with things, and I slow down, and I'm a firm believer that there is always a solution to a situation when something is difficult. And I'm kind of curious to see what that solution is most of the time. And I'm not too afraid to walk away from something and think, right, okay, there's got to be an alternative plan. And that's what Bruce did. And I like that. There's nothing wrong with turning away, but no, not really. Maybe it's just a strong streak of stupidity.
No, it's a character. It's a character trait you have, Sam, that just everybody loves you for it. Really, it's just you are that type of bloke that you roll with whatever comes your way, and you just deal with it. From what I've seen of you,
life is just really interesting.
Yeah.
There's always interesting stuff going on, and there's always good stuff going on. Even in the worst situations, there are things that are happening that are interesting. And yet, okay, something may be completely pear-shaped and nasty at that particular moment, but hey, think about this. You make it through that situation and you've got a great story to tell.
Absolutely.
So there's the right, just to remember when you're in the middle of the shit.
Mate, that is such a fantastic mentality to have towards everything. I love that. I absolutely love it.
My God spends most of the time completely knackered because of that.
Because you're just, hey, let's just go with it. Mate, that's nearly 2.5 hours, and we've just finished the Patreon questions. There's still a load of questions to go on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but for me, I am running out of time because the wife has plans this evening.
Right.
Could we do a part 2, maybe? I'll get you back on and we can do some more.
If you're prepared to risk it, then yeah, why not? Let's go for it. It'll be fun. I've really enjoyed such fantastic questions. These have been really good. So thank you very much to everybody who's been sending those in. Some of you guys I know, but a lot of you guys I don't. So yeah, it's good to link up with you. Cheers.
It's been awesome, isn't it? Because we've sort of known each other for quite a few years, but when you're at these like the Hub and the Overland event and the shows and stuff, you don't get time to talk to each other. You're always talking with other people, and you know you sit in on, like, I'll sit in on, listen to some of your presentations and stuff, but you never get that chance to chat because you're always chatting with other people, don't you? So thank you very much for. No, I really do appreciate you coming on, and it's been great to have a good chat with you this time.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Cheers.
No problem at all. Mate, please feel free, do some plugging for your books and whatever else you need to do for just now. Over to you.
All right, thank you. Well, I have 4 books out. I didn't intend to write anything when I was on the round the world trip, but I did write a journal every day. And this is one of my top tips to anybody that's traveling: write a journal. Make yourself do it. You're on intake overload when you're traveling. And that means it's almost like having a huge funnel strapped to the front of your head with the pointy bit, the one that going into your brain. And it's so easy to forget stuff from one week to the next. So write a journal. Some days write lots, whatever your instinct is, and other days you've just been too darn busy. Write down 20 keywords. Those will be enough to spark off what has happened that day, the memories of. Without those journals, I would never have been able to write the books. The books came about because I wrote a few magazine articles, and when I got back at the end of the trip, the editor of the magazine, it was Motorcycle Sport and Leisure in the UK, said, "Sam, we're getting loads of letters and emails from people saying they like your articles. When's your book coming out?" Well, my first thought was, well, what book? I didn't even want to write articles until I had a go. So I thought, well, let's have a go and see what happens. Into Africa came out, and people liked it. So we're asking what happens next. And so I sat down to write Under Asian Skies. And in the end, Distant Suns was book 3, and Tortillas to Totems was book 4. And the 4 books take you through the different continents of what made up the 8-year journey around the world. The books are out now as paperbacks, and you can either get them direct from me, signed copies. or you can link up with me at a show when they ever start happening again, or they're available from Amazon and the Book Depository. The books are also available in Kindle format, so those again from Amazon, but they're also, as Brewster kindly mentioned earlier on, they're out in audiobook format. And those are downloadable from Audibles and from iTunes. Or if you're a little bit old school like me and you fancy something physical, then I still have copies of Into Africa, Under Asian Skies and Distant Suns in CD format, which you can get direct from me. So, yeah, thank you very much. I hope you'll have a go. If you haven't read any of the books, then may I suggest you start with Into Africa. You've already heard some of the stories, and that's where I turn in to, from somebody who's a complete motorcycling numpty into somebody who's addicted to this amazing way of travel.
I can only vouch for what Sam's saying. I'm listening to the Audible version of Into Africa at the moment, and it's awesome. Check it out. There'll be links down below in the description, so make sure you check them out. Sam, thank you so much, mate. I can't wait till we see each other in person again. Looking forward to that, and all the best to you and Birgit. I hope everything is going well, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much indeed, and likewise, and same to all the listeners. Cheers.
Awesome, dude. Look after yourself. Right, folks, I hope you've enjoyed that chat. There's so much more which we could cover, but there will be a part 2. So, look after yourselves, folks. Remember what we always say. Look after those that you love, but get on out there and live your life. Ooh-ha.